This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rada back again with episode 77 of A Geek Leader podcast. And today on the show we've got John Hittler. He's the author of The Motivation Trap. And in this episode we talk about John's journey through business and how he became a coach and a leader. And he created a company called Evoking Genius. We talk about the difference between purpose and motivation and how to invoke that genius talent that we all have. During the story, he tells a story about hostage negotiation that's just awesome. So give it up for John Hittler. If you don't mind telling the audience a little bit about kind of your history and how you got into coaching and how you founded Evoking Genius and kind of where that's taken you.
Sure. It was not a linear path, to be sure. I'm an economist by trade. I've started 9 different companies and a private foundation. And one of the things I was asked to do on contract in 2000 was to lead entrepreneurial groups, like as a facilitator for a company that works with entrepreneurs. Really fun. It was a great side gig. I had no responsibility except to show up and do the gigs, and they paid me, and it was really kind of fun. And they called it coaching, but it wasn't. It was really facilitating. But that's how I got started. And 6 or 7 years later, I got recruited into a real coaching firm. And that was a disaster. It was fraudulent. It was a Ponzi scheme. But I met my 2 founding partners for Evoking Genius in that firm. And we decided to leave and start our own gig. And I've been coaching ever since. That was 2007 that we made that move. And I've loved it ever since. It was a good fit, and it's now the only business I have. I've always had 2 or 3 at a time. It's the only business I work in now is the coaching business, which is really fun.
Yeah, I'm the same way as far as the way you've been in the past, having several things, in the fire, several things going on, such as this podcast, as well as other endeavors. So how did you realize that it was a fraud, and what made you, or what did you feel like making that jump to kind of start your own and get out of that?
Yeah, it was a partner owned. So the pitch was, hey, you could be a founding partner. You can have equity from the beginning. It was an international coaching firm that started in Europe, and they purposely didn't go to the United States first, even though that was the biggest coaching market. They said, let's hone our offer and whatnot in Europe, make sure we know what we're doing, and then we'll go to US as a second territory or a third territory. And so they rounded up a bunch of guys, none of whom necessarily had a big background in coaching, but they were entrepreneurial. And I was one of them. And the first thing they did was they took a check from us. And the second thing they did was they took all those checks, put them in a bank account, and took all the money and sent it back to Europe. So that was a good clue. And we said, well, how do we run a business here? You just took all the money. And they said, well, you got all this talent. You just, you guys can just eat what you kill and you'll be fine. And I was like, okay, this is not a good start.
Yeah.
And it got worse from there. Every time you'd ask a question, you'd get another answer. And then we found out after we had invested that the guy that started it in the U.S., like commando by himself, hadn't filed taxes in 3 years, and they owed the IRS a bunch of money. Well, that was all left with these brand new founding partners. So not only do we have no money, we had a bunch of debt with the IRS, and you just go, okay, this is not good. And I was the first one that raised my hand and said, I'm out. And they said, well, yep, you got equity in. And I said, I don't care. I'm out.
So if I'm a team lead, why is it that I would be interested in getting a coach? What kind of benefits are there for a new leader, new manager, new director, or even a CEO to get coaching from the outside?
Yeah, so we're very pragmatic about it. Myself and my partner, we say do it for a couple of reasons. First, because you want to be the best leader or CEO or whatnot, but really on a practical basis. Do it because there's a verifiable ROI. If you hire a coach and they say, well, I can't guarantee this will pay for itself, but you should do it because it's a good idea, don't hire them. Like you buy a new copier or you hire a new admin and you hope, or a new director of sales, you don't hire them and say, well, I sure hope they raise our sales. No, you say, we want them to take us from X to 2X. That's why we hired them. We want a return on our investment. Coaching should be no different. You should be able to say, here's what I'd like to take on in coaching, calculate what that would be worth. And let's say you're a CEO that says, we'd like to double in the next 2 years. All right, let's say you're at $1 million. If you go from $1 million to 2 million and you could not have done that on your own, like you don't know how to do it, you don't give all the credit to the coaching partnership, but you say, maybe I could have gone $500,000, but I couldn't have gone 2 million, a full million on doubling. There's $500,000 worth of value. And you go, that's worth it for me to hire a coach. Do it because there's ROI. There's tons of intangibles you get as well, but do it because there's a verifiable ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think you always have to have an ROI for the things that you do. And a lot of times I've seen with IT managers and software managers, they don't really see themselves as providing an ROI. They always say, well, we're just an expense to the business. We just have to keep the lights on.
We're a cost of doing business. No.
Yeah, I don't think that's not the right way of approaching it.
Nope. If you set it up that you have to justify it and have an ROI, you'll think about your whole business and your whole role differently. Instead of saying, I'm just a service cost and I'm overhead. What do you do when it's slow? You cut overhead. That's the first thing you do. So
exactly. You never want to be the overhead.
Nope.
So you recently wrote a book, and I want to talk a little bit about it, The Motivation Trap. What inspired you to write the book, The Motivation Trap, and where did that title come from?
Yeah, we bantered about on the title. The working title is Motivation Sucks. And I knew that would never survive. The publishers would never let it go. Where I came up with both the book and the title is I work with CEOs. I work a lot with team leaders in their coaching. And one of the frustrations I get from almost all of them was I'd say, well, what are you having struggling with? And what they almost all say is, I don't know how to keep my people motivated. And my response was, why? That's exhausting to be responsible for. Why am I in charge of keeping John Rauda motivated? It's not my job. And you and I both live this. There are days when you get up to do your podcast or do your IT work or do your consulting work that you just don't feel it. You know what? You get up and do it anyhow, and you do it professionally, and you do it to the best of your knowledge. Even if you had a bad night's sleep, even if you're fighting a cold, you don't have to feel highly motivated to do that. And if the methodology that they're pursuing is, I need my teammates to all feel motivated to do their work, you're going to get crushed, because motivation just is hard to sustain on a day-to-day basis. It's just not a very good tool. It's just not set up to do that. Our brain doesn't work that way to stay at a high motivation level for long periods of time. Motivation is a short-term tool. So these guys are trying to jack their people up every single day, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, I've always thought that leaders that did that were more like a hype man at a party.
They are. They're the promoter out on the street trying to get people to come in and pay a cover charge. That's who they are. And you go,
right.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, I've always been one of those people that, a lot of times I'll use the excuse of motivation and say, well, I'm not motivated to do this. But then I started realizing, and I've learned this when I started running. I started running back, it's been a long time ago now. But I had a friend that encouraged me to do a marathon, and I'd ran 5Ks, but I've never ran further than that. And so to motivate myself, let's put that in quotes, I went ahead and signed up for a marathon several months out so that I paid the money. I feel like I had to do it. But then there was several mornings where I wasn't motivated to run, but I would start running, and maybe that first mile was miserable. But once I got past that, I didn't need the motivation. I was just kind of already going. It's like the train had already started and it was hard to stop. And I felt like I was energized and ready to go.
Well, that's a perfect athletics and physical fitness is a great place to look at this. There were days if you hadn't paid the money and you planned on doing marathon but hadn't signed up. Let's take it a step further. Let's say it was a fundraiser as well, and you've actually met 3 kids with a incurable disease, and they're your team, and you're raising money for their research and cure, hopefully to cure them. You're going to get your butt out of bed every morning, even if it's cold, even if it's raining, even if your knee's a little sore, and you're going to do your miles. And if you don't do any of that stuff, if you don't pay the money up front, if you don't have a date, you say, you know what, I'm working up to a marathon, but some days I'm just not motivated to do it. It's funny. Once it shifts from motivation to purpose, which is I've actually gone to the pediatric hospital and met my 3 kids on my team. I'm doing it with people at work, so I've got a community. You don't need motivation. Because if everybody says we're meeting at this park at 5:30 in the morning and we're going to get our miles in before we go to work, you show up. You take the motivation part of it out of it, because at 5:30 in the morning, if it's drizzling and 47 degrees, nobody wants to go out and run 10 miles in the dark. You don't want to do it. And no amount of motivation. It's just a bad tool to bet on. We wouldn't go to Vegas and bet that you would get out of bed when it's 5:30 in the morning, dark, 47 degrees and drizzling, if you don't have skin in the game. And motivation is not the tool for that. You need something much stronger.
Do you think a lot of people interchangeably use the words, maybe inappropriately use the words purpose and motivation?
Yes. And here's the difference. Again, take weight loss. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you've seen it. January 3rd, wherever you go and work out, the place is packed because everybody says I'm gonna get in shape this year. And by January 15th, the herd has thinned, and by February 15th, it's the same people that you saw at the gym all year last year. The difference is they're wanting and they're hoping and they're motivated to lose 20 pounds. But now let's say you've got a kid getting married in June and you go, oh my God, I can't look fat for the wedding. That motivation will actually work for that 6-month period because you've got a specific date, but you've got an event. Now you're much more dedicated, much more on purpose, because you know those pictures are going to live in perpetuity. And the last thing you want to look like is fat in your tux, or if you're the mother of the bride, fat in your mother of the bride's dress. So they go, I gotta drop 20 pounds because I'm not going to look fat in those pictures. You'll get to the gym. You'll absolutely will. Just to say, this is my New Year's resolution, I really want to lose 20 pounds. It rarely works. And that's why that industry is so huge, is because they have to do something else, like sell you the food and all that other kind of stuff. They have to take all of the variables out of it, which is very, very difficult to do. But those are rah-rah things too. Go to your meeting, meet with your counselor, sign in, weigh in, they clap for you. Maybe until you face challenges with that. And everybody faces challenges with if you're losing weight. It's just impossible not to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. The first time I heard anybody really talk about purpose when it comes to motivation, I think was Dan Pink, probably a decade ago now, in a book where he talked about it. And I remember I just became a manager, and I had people quitting left and right, and I kept blaming that on other things. And eventually someone kind of pointed it back that it's probably you. You're not giving the people what they need. So I started reading about how I could, quote, motivate people. And I tried the rah-rah things. I tried the sticks and carrots, which you have under your cover of your book, you have a carrot inside of a jar, which is the perfect analogy of trapping motivation.
And also on that cover is an endorsement from Dan Pink.
Yeah.
Dan's a friend of mine, and he endorsed the book wholeheartedly because it kind of went clinically into what he was talking about. Yeah,
that's exactly where I was getting to, is that, when he talked about purpose, I tried to figure out how I could apply purpose and to go beyond, simple motivation. And when I figured out a couple of things that we could put into it, as far as like our team, we built software, right? So we made, at that time we were building a little mobile app for the field technicians to close their orders and their tickets. And the next request that came in was like to add a button to the form. And I was like, oh, sure. My God, how can I add purpose to something like this? How does this have purpose? And I ended up calling some of the technicians and just asking them, I said, what would this button mean to you? And he's like, well, we close all of our tickets at the end of the day. It'll save me probably 10 or 12 minutes. And I said, so that's 10 or 12 minutes before you go home, right? He's like, yeah, we'll get out a little early probably. I said, and what do you do when you go home? He's like, well, I play soccer with my kids or throw the baseball or something like that. And I said, there's my purpose. That's what I can use. So then when we had our team meeting and we were talking about this new feature, I said, look, what this is going to do is it's going to allow 120 guys to get about 10 more minutes every day with their kids.
Yep.
Boom. There's a purpose.
Yep. Well, it's funny. We work with one of my clients. It's a venture-backed gaming company, and they've already published one and sold it for $1 gazillion. They're very successful. They know what they're doing. But it's a band of rebels. They're on their second startup, and they're much wiser on the cultural part, because the first time they had a tough time with their culture and survived because the game was good. The second time they said, look, it was so excruciating that first time. Yes, we sold our game, we made money, but we'd like to enjoy the ride. So they set it up, and we worked with them in advance on the second one. What they came up with, which was beautiful, it hit all of Dan's metrics, and it hit all of mine as well. They founded the company with the directive. I mean, it's a mandate that you do the best work of your life. So if John wants to interview and come to work here, it's both an invitation for you to be able to do the best work of your life. Like, that's appealing to you. And if it's not, you'll never come. Well, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to have to increase my capacity? Yep. And your skill set, and you're going to essentially become a master of your craft. That's one of Dan's points is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Well, if you don't want to do that, you would never come to work at that place. And oh, by the way, they don't have a problem with people working extra because their work is their craft and they love it and they dive into it. And it doesn't mean they don't have the same challenges they would have had if they didn't have that directive. What's brilliant about it is in the interview process, when they hire talented people to come to work for them, they weed them out at the door. Because anybody that says, well, as long as I can do it, on my own schedule when I feel like it, they just go, the question they ask them is, if you do it on your own schedule when you feel like it, will you be able to do the best work of your life? And they say, well, I'm not sure. Then you're not a good fit. Don't come to work here. Go work in the gaming business, but not for us. It's not a good fit. So they've just gotten past it. They don't do rah-rah stuff. They celebrate milestones when they come because they're in the development phase. Until you publish the game, you have to look at milestones and pick one and say, this was a big milestone. We got a beta testing up or whatever. So they do celebrate those, but they celebrate them with like pizza for lunch because they don't need to rah-rah these guys. They go, nice job, guys. We finally got to the first big milestone. They'll publish their game sometime next year. And I'm guessing it'll be a huge success. But even if it's not, if the public doesn't accept it, it won't be because they didn't motivate their guys or they didn't get it out at this date versus that date. They are confident that what they put out will be the absolute best product they could have because everybody is playing with a mandate and in pursuit of, like they love it, doing their best work of their life. Like take it to running. I mean, it'd be like you get your best marathon time and you say, you know what, I'm running the second one because I felt like I hit a wall in there. I'm going to do better training this thing and I want to take a half hour off my marathon time. It's worth the pursuit just because you're not doing it because you want to run long distances in the rain on a Tuesday morning. No, you're doing it because you say, you know what? I felt like I could have done better. I was happy that I did it, but boy, now that I've done it, I'll be better on the second one, and I want to beat my time. That's not motivation. That's more like you've got a North Star that you say that keeps me going all the time. I don't have to do rah-rah with you if you've got that. You've already got that.
So what do you do if, let's say, you're brought into a company and you don't get to hire the people that are already there, and maybe how do you find their what is they want to be masters at whatever they want purpose for? How do you find that to kind of get past this whole idea of they're not motivated? How do I get them motivated?
Sure, and it's a tough question for CEOs because a lot of CEOs think they have to provide that, exactly. And that's the mistake. Use a simple theory of edit versus create. Let the team and the individuals create whatever they want. And let's say they're all about chasing butterflies and fairies. If that's their purpose and motivation, if the CEO signs off on it and may edit, they don't create it. If the team says, as long as we have unicorns and fairies as our theme and as our inspiration, we will work hard every day. You won't have to worry a thing. We'll be great. And if the CEO goes, I'm not buying it. I don't think we can get there with unicorns and fairies. I don't think we can do it. The CEO can counter, but what most CEOs do is they do it with a small group or with a consultant or with their co-founder, and then they come in and announce it and try to sell it to the team. Now you're trying to convince people to play your game instead of letting them come up with a game. Yeah, you do this with kids. You do this with kids all the time. Instead of saying, here's how we're going to do it, you go, how would you like to skip to the bathtub? Would you like to crawl to the bathtub? Or would you like to have a spelling bee contest and you get to go 10 feet forward every time you spell a new word and the first guy in the bathtub wins? Let the kids figure it out. All you care about is that they go into the bathtub and take their bath. And what some people do is they say, no, it's my job to get my kids into the tub. And so I bark at them until they do it. And it's a fight. And you go, What do you care? As long as your kids get in the bathtub, why couldn't you make the path to them taking a bath much more enjoyable and simpler for you? So we encourage the CEOs and the senior leaders to edit versus create. Let the team come up with it. Don't even have the CEO in the room until they're done. And then you do a little show and tell or a little fashion show. And the CEO has a little advance notice so that they can say, I like all of it. This one little piece here I'm a little concerned about. They can counter, and the team will, and then when they counter, the team will redesign that little piece that the CEO doesn't like. Fine. Then everybody's happy. Now the CEO says, I'm not ramming my game down their throat. They invented the game. They like the game. My job is to manage according and lead according to what we agreed to as a team. It's just much easier.
Yeah, my wife and I, we recently did like some parenting videos or something. And one of the things on there it talked about, instead of like telling your kids, give them a choice.
Just give them a choice.
Yeah. Yep. And that made such a world of difference. It was like, hey, do you want to take your bath first, or do you want to do your homework first?
Or do you want to read you want to do stories before you do baths, or you want to do stories after you do baths? And you go, what do you care? Either way, you're going to do bedtime stories and baths. And unless the kids are filthy dirty, what do you care that you do the stories first?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it doesn't make that much difference. And people say, no, we have to do bath and then brush our teeth. And then you go, why? Who died and made that the rule? And most kids at 4 don't follow a straight path for that stuff. They just don't, because that's the nature of being 4. You get distracted on the way to the bathtub. You don't want to you get in your room and there's a toy there. You go, oh, geez, they're not doing it. And I got to go and yell at them to get in the bathtub. Yeah, do you really want to have that relationship with your kids that what you do is yell at them to do everything? No. Yeah. You just set it up and they get to choose. And you also raise adults that way as opposed to raising order takers.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think that that leaders can apply that as well? What is the advantages? Or we talked about just asking them, but what are some other ways that we can take that to like the next level as far as we've edited, we've found kind of some things that they're passionate about. It's not going to work, but how can we get them on the right track? Sure.
There's a lot of tools in the book. The one that we like the most, and not surprising, it's in our name for our company, but we have a trademarked or patented process for uncovering and articulating what we call your singular gift of genius talent. And the theory being there's a ton of genetic markers in your DNA, all of which make you uniquely you. Why would it not be possible that one of those markers is also a unique gift of talent? And people say, I've never heard of that. Well, because scientists haven't proven it. We don't try to prove it. We say, take on that theory or that supposition, and what if we could just pull that out of you? And it takes about 2 hours. So we go into companies a lot and say, you want to get more out of your team? If your IT director or your person who answers the phone or your customer service manager or your VP of sales has a title, what's the way to sell as a VP of sales? There's no one way. There's 1,000 different ways that successful people sell. There's probably 1 million different ways that successful people sell. There's 100 or 200 or 500 different ways that teachers teach 4th grade. What's the way that works most in coordination with the singular gift of genius talent you were given? And if you pull that out, you say, wow, now I got my whole team at their highest, and allow them to get their work done, fulfill on the purpose for their job title using their genius talent, as opposed to saying, the way that you do sales is by cold calling and prospecting and this and that. What if you're not hardwired to do that? What if that doesn't work well for you? You're not going to have much fun, and you're probably not going to be very successful if you follow someone else's recipe that's not authentically related to you.
No, I think that's really good. So, using DNA or using something to figure out kind of what their talent is, how do people receive that? Like if you told me, or you worked with me and you figured out that this is what, my genius talent is, how do people typically receive that? Are they excited about it? Is it like a shock for them, or is it something that always like, I knew that?
No, it's a great question. when we hit the nail on the head, we have a lot of people that cry because it's an emotional piece for them to have reflected back to them in their own language, because it's their language, not ours. It's their genius. I don't have a dog in the fight. If you and I do it, it's 2 hours. I have no idea in advance what your genius talent is. And professionally, if you will, I don't care. Kind of like you go to a doctor and they're not supposed to say, I'm going to hope it's this and look for this because that's not as bad as this. They just say, my job is to figure out what's wrong, why you're not healthy. So we do the same thing. We don't care what the genius talent is. We just care that we run it agnostically or in an unbiased way so that what is present pulls out. And then we reflect it back to people and they go, oh my God, yeah, I've been doing that my whole life. And you know what? That's how I got from here to there. This is how I overcame this obstacle. This is how I seemingly out of nowhere, I won this contest as a 10th grader, or I climbed this mountain or did this hurdle, and you go, yeah, it's because it's part of your DNA. And then they go back and ask their parents, and the parents say, yeah, you were like that from day one out of the womb. They go, why didn't you tell me that? Well, we knew it, but there's no language really around it. So people don't talk so much about it. What we do is we give language to it. I'll give you an example, a simple one. My own genius talent is creating seemingly impossible outcomes that address multiple diverse agendas. And people go, where did you get that? Well, my partners ran the process on me, and that's what popped out. And they say, I've never heard of that because it's not on a standardized test. Because like your DNA, my DNA is not standardized. It's unique to me. So people go, well, what do you do with that? Well, some of the things I've done, I talked my way into a top 10 university without applying or being accepted. I never applied. I never was accepted. And I walked there at registration. 2 days later, I was in the freshman class with a full ride and graduated 4 years later. And people said, you can't do that. And you go, why not? I was 18. I had no idea I had a genius talent. I just didn't have a backup plan. So I thought, why would this not work? And that's part of the, as a friend of mine says, the idiot savant part of it. He said, when you have a genius talent, it never dawns on you that this would not be possible or even probable. And people said, how the heck did you do that? Well, it's not a linear process. I've also done 2 successful hostage negotiations with the FBI. They couldn't get the hostage out, and I could. And I knew I could. And both times they said, don't interfere or we'll put you in jail. And I was connected to both of the hostages. So I waited for them to finally, one of them after 17 days, they finally went into town. We were in Montana, out in the middle of nowhere. They went into town and took a coffee break. And I said, this is my chance. I walked onto the property where the hostage was. But the problem was you had to walk 1.5 miles to get to where the hostage was. And it's just open space. And so the FBI was afraid to drive on there because they were trespassing possibly, and they were worried they'd either hurt the hostage or shoot the FBI. I just went on unarmed and said, they're not going to shoot me. They knew who I was because I was connected to the hostage, and I didn't have a gun, and I didn't walk on with an FBI vest. And 2 hours later, I walked out with the hostage. No guns, no violence, no money, no nothing. But every single player in that, except the FBI, they were mad. Everybody got what they wanted. And that's what I do. I do that really well. It's a really, really limited scope. Works great for coaching. Because what do people want? They go, I'll ask them, what would you, if I give you a magic wand and you could create the impossible, they'd say, it would be impossible, but I'd love to do it. I'd love to do this. And they go, great, we're putting that on the list. And they go, you think we can do that? For me, if it's not seemingly impossible, I'm really not very interested, and I know how to do it. I don't know when I hear it exactly. There's no linear thing that says, oh, that's no problem, we'll do that. I just go, when it's impossible, that's when I play the game. And when it's mundane, and my word mundane, when somebody says, I've got a little problem I need some help with, I'm worthless because I'm just not interested in, quote, little problems. Find somebody that's really good at solving little problems. And for them, that's a great place to play. It's a terrible place for me to play. And you're the same way. You're going to have a very specific, almost quirky thing. And you go, where did you come up with that? You go, it's what I've done it my whole life. The language part is the important. And when you get that on every person on your team, it doesn't matter what their role is. They will go, you mean what I get to do every day is create seemingly impossible outcomes that address multiple diverse agendas? And you go, yep, We got a total fustercluck here. The customer's mad. Your team has been out of shape because they did this. We screwed up here. Can you make this all so that everybody gets a big win? And you go, yeah, I could do that. And for somebody with the right skill set, they go, that would be fun. And other people go, oh my God, this is a mess. And everybody's mad. Oh, why me? Because the wrong person, they would say, why me? The right person would say, no problem. Let's have fun.
So I got to back up just a second.
Sure.
And hit on this hostage negotiation that you kind of you threw out there. But what was going through your brain as far as like fear, anxiousness, or whatever when you were walking that,
it's about a mile and a quarter to the front door. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're walking up there, like what does the dialogue in your head sound like?
Well, so I hadn't talked to all the parties, but the hostage was my goddaughter. The FBI, I knew their stance, which was stay out of it. This is our jurisdiction and blah, blah, blah. And so they forbade me from doing anything. I knew the parents involved because they were very, very dear friends of mine. And I knew the lady who was holding the hostage. She was a Montana militia lady, basically kind of almost like a compound, almost like a Jonestown compound. She wasn't quite that bad, but she was a zealot. And she felt like she had done everything wrong. And she wanted to get paid for her work. The long story is she ran adoptions and she wanted to re-adopt this kid and get paid. Mm-hmm. So she was the easy one. She didn't really want to mess with the kids. She just wanted to get paid and go, that's the easiest one you can do. But I walked up and I thought, she's not going to shoot me because I had talked to her several times during this until the FBI finally said, you can't talk to her anymore because you're interfering. Fine. But she knew who I was. She knew that I was not political. I was not legal. I had no jurisdiction. I was just an interested person because I knew it was my goddaughter and she knew that. So the only chance I took was, would she shoot me? Why? If I thought, worst case, she's going to say, get the hell out of here. You're not welcome here. If she didn't want me at the front door. So that was the only chance I had to take was that she wouldn't shoot me. And why would she shoot me? Because now she's in big trouble. Now the FBI is going to storm the place because now they know there's violence and somebody's hurt or dead. Well, then she's in big trouble. So that you go, that's my chances? She's not going to shoot me. She was well armed and had a whole bunch of people there. She wasn't going to shoot me. That was the only thing I had to take into consideration was, would she shoot me? And would she shoot my goddaughter? And I thought, if she wanted to shoot my goddaughter, you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg. If she's dead, now you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life, and there's no way anybody's going to pay you for anything. So there's no way she's going to harm the hostage. She wasn't treating her really well. But, she wasn't treating her cruelly. It was just scarce. It was kind of a working farm. So for me, it was kind of fun. Once I'd done that mental calculation, which I did about the first 10 minutes of this whole thing, I said, hey, just let me go in there. Let me take a crack at it before you guys get involved. And they're like, hey, you stay out of here. They were like, you can't interfere. So, and they kept me that way for about 17 days. And when I finally realized that if I succeed, what is the FBI going to do? Complain? Are they going to go to the press and say, we couldn't get this kid out after 17 days and an unarmed private citizen got her out in 2 hours? They'd embarrass themselves. And that was the part that took me a little while to kind of settle with. And then I just had to wait for my opportunity where they were in town having a cup of coffee. Nobody was watching. And then I just walked on. So, but it was actually quite fun. And the aftermath dealing with some of the players were not happy, but they weren't dangerous. They just weren't happy. I had to get them the win they wanted, which was not that easy. So you're negotiating, it'd be like going to the Middle East. You're negotiating with Egypt, who can't stand Israel, but Israel has to have this. And then the Palestinians say, yeah, but that's not fair. And you go, it's kind of like that. You have to give everybody a win. And you go, how can we do this with everybody? They have very, very different agendas. You go, yeah, certainly it can be done. And it's like a multi-dimensional, like a 4-dimensional puzzle that you have to solve. Love that. Absolutely love that. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
it's a crazy story.
I promise you, you have a genius that's just as powerful, but it might be in empathy. It might be in empathy or in creativity or in the theme, if you will. My theme is seemingly impossible. Somehow I was gifted with this thing of, when there's no solution, I'm a good guy to send in, and there's not. It's not a very common skill. That's fine. That's why it's unique. And yours will be just as unique in whatever theme you come up with. And I don't care what the theme is. My job is to help you find it. But you hear these, and we've done it with some pretty important people, and even they go, "Wow, I've done all this success." And what normally happens with super successful people is they have been running a version. They just didn't have the language for it. They had no idea their opportunity and their playground and their industry and probably their timing, like they were born at the right time in history, all collided for them to work in their genius. They just didn't have the language for it. And they get the language for it and they go, "Oh my God, this is why I succeeded here. And that's all I did here." They thought I was doing high tech, or they thought I was doing science, or they thought I was doing construction. What I was really doing was this. And you go, "That's why you were so successful compared to everybody else." And they go, "Oh, it makes so much sense." Great. It just gives them language for something they might have been doing naturally. Most people have no idea what it is. And then they get it and they go, "Wow, I want to start using this every day." Yep. Mm-hmm. It's also the way you parent, or the way that you're a good friend. Some people are a good friend, like they show up on a Saturday morning with a pickup truck and a strong back, and they help you move. Or they're a great person to drive you to the airport when you have to take a flight. That's the kind of friend they are. They show up that way. Other people are great listeners. Like you can call them at 2 a.m. and they will listen and be non-judgmental. How do you friend? Everybody friends differently. What if you friended at some level connected, or parented at some level connected to your genius? Because there's different parenting styles as well. Why not parent the way you were hardwired?
Wow, that's really good stuff. I think we can all take a little bit. Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one more question. It's a little bit off topic.
Oh, I love that.
But when I first found out about your book and I saw John Hittler, I noticed the spelling was different. But there's that growing up with the name Hitler. What was that like?
Yes. So the funny thing is, not that, it's about what you can imagine. Basically, I fought my way out of grade school. That's how you do it, because you're going to get picked. You're going to get picked on because you have big ears, or because you have a lisp, or because you're super smart, or you're not super smart. Kids are going to find reasons to pick on you. Right. In my case, I'm one of 9. We're actually Irish Catholic. I'm 3 of the grandparents are Irish, and then of course the outlier, we get his name. The one paternal grandfather, we get his name. Mm. So my parents buy a house in essentially a new suburb. I grew up in the Detroit area, and they burned the city down at the end of the 60s. In 68, they had riots and burned the city down. And if you still lived in the city, everybody moved to, as they called it, the safe suburbs, which was code for all white people. You just got out of the city. Fair enough. Everybody did it, and now it's suburbia. Well, they bought a house, and it's framed, and you may have done this. You buy a new house, and they say, "Well, I want lot number 68, and I want floor plan B, and I want the extra family room as an add-on." Great, you can do that. You don't know who the neighbors are, because they can't tell you, "Oh, John, I should probably tell you there's Chinese people moving in next door to you, so that may influence." You can't do that. It's illegal. So who do we move in? Who is the neighborhood? 90% Jewish. Oh, wow. Great. So not only do my parents not care because they're stubborn Irish, they kind of looked at it like, this is perfect for building character. And we're going, you don't have to try to ride home from the playground, because in those days, if you wanted to go have fun, you got on your bike like everybody and went and played ball after school, or went pick up basketball or baseball or whatever. And then you drove home or rode home. But you might have a mile ride home on your bike, and you'd get confronted by 4. It was usually myself and my best friend, sometimes one of my brothers. It was never a fair fight. It was never 3 kids our age and our size saying, "We want to challenge you to fight." It was kids who had history in World War II. And I totally got that even as a kid. But that wasn't me. His real name wasn't Hitler. This was our original family spelling. The mistake, if there was one, was that we were one of the few people that didn't change it. There were a lot of people named Hitler. It wasn't a super popular name, but anybody with that name, especially in Germany, just changed it. They just took it. And my parents just refused to. They were super stubborn and very straightforward. And to make it worse, my mom forbade us from fighting, because she was smart enough to know we're going to get in trouble at times. And So if you got in a tussle, you were always outnumbered, and they were always kids bigger than you. But we fought. Our advantage was we fought every day. Not every day, but we fought once a week. So we knew how to fight, even against kids that are bigger. The real problem you had is if those kids beat the crap out of you, which happened a fair amount of time. 1 out of 3 times you'd get your butt kicked, and 2 out of 3 we know how to fight, and we could make them disperse. But when you came home with a fat lip or a black eye, you were really in trouble when you got home, because my mom didn't allow fighting, and you couldn't talk your way out of a black eye or a fat lip. So then the worst was, there was no corporal punishment, but you were grounded, or you go, gosh darn it, not only did I get my lip busted and I need 2 stitches, but I'm grounded for 2 weeks. That was horrible.
Wow.
But imagine that you were my best friend growing up. That meant you were in harm's way. By definition, if you were my best friend. So at 10, imagine the lessons we both learned. Now, we didn't know we were learning them. We're in danger, and it's a rough thing for a 10-year-old to have to fight their way out of stuff frequently. But my best friends always said the same thing. I said, John, you don't have, they want me. They don't want you. If you want to keep going, I'll take the butt with. And all of my best friends said, if they go, because they were stubborn Irish too. We were Irish Catholic. They all said the same thing. If they go after you, they're going to have to go through me too. So I always had a partner, and I never mandated that with my best friends. But that was what I learned at 10 about being a best friend, is something some people never learn in their whole life because they have casual or fair weather friends. I learned it at 10 that if I was your friend, we were in it like forever, and no matter what, and vice versa. What a brilliant thing to learn at 10. I had no idea I was learning it at 10. When you're older, you kind of get that and go, no wonder I'm the kind of friend I am. Like, I'll do anything for my friends. And generally speaking, the people that are close to me will do anything for me. Now, do they have to fight on my behalf now? No. But they will do almost anything. And you go, I wouldn't have it any other way, because for me, even at this stage in life, anything short of that is a social media friend. It's a Facebook friend. It's an acquaintance or somebody I see twice a year at a barbecue or a party, and you go, I like them and whatnot, but they're not, if you will, friends, because my friends are kind of like, almost like mafia friends, where you go, and nothing is too big. And you go, wow, you learned that at 10? What a nice thing to learn. Hard way to learn it, but what a great gift. And most people have a hard time learning that. They learn it at some point, but would your friends take on physical danger on your behalf? I'm sure a lot would say they would, but if it came to that, would they really do it? You go, my friends did as a kid. You go, wow, they fought alongside me. And sometimes they got their butt kicked too. And I'm sure when they came home, their parents knew. They said, how did you guys get in a fight with a bunch of kids older than you were? I said, well, they were picking on, as soon as they knew it was because of my last name, not because, they were Sullivan. They were going to pick on the Sullivan kid. That wasn't controversial. They're picking on the Hittler kid. And Sullivan was my best friend, or O'Leary, or whatever other Irish name. That was my best friend. And they were in harm's way. So they went home with a fat lip too, or a black eye. So it was interesting, and I'm actually incredibly grateful for it now. I'll tell you the other advantage now is in this day of being able to Google people and whatnot. I haven't carried a business card since the internet, and people say, "Do you have a card?" I go, "My last name is Hittler. If you need to find me, just," and if you say my name is John Davis or John Smith, and they go, "God, what was that guy's last name? I can't remember." And they meet you at a conference, they can't remember. Nobody goes home from the conference and says, "God, I met this guy, and he had this really unusual name, but I can't remember what it is." Nobody says that. So it's a huge advantage that way as well.
Yeah, I just Googled you, and sure enough, it's your LinkedIn profile, Evoking Genius, your Facebook.
It's all, yeah, because
Twitter, it's all you.
Yeah, and I don't do any SEO stuff, none of that. It's just there's not very many Hitlers. There's actually 3 named John with different middle initials, and I've met both of them. One's related to me distantly, and the other one, I got to imagine he is, but we can't figure it out. We haven't been able to find common. So maybe there were actually 2 different families. One's in Wisconsin and one's in St. Louis, I think. And I've talked to them both, and we've laughed about it. And, and I'm like friends with them on Facebook. So I'll wish them happy birthday on their timeline and make sure. And I'll say, this is from the real John Hittler. And people see, wait a minute, there's another John Hittler that wished you happy birthday. And you go, yeah, there's another John Hittler. So we have a good time with it, but I don't know them well. It's just, again, you can Google it and say, oh, wow, there's more than one. Huh. That's cool.
Well, that's a super cool perspective to have.
Oh yeah, no, well, if you look at it you could look at it like a curse and just be a victim your whole life, or you could say, you know what, there's actually hidden gifts in this, and I'm very big at looking for the hidden gift, and that's probably a little bit a part of my genius. It's somehow connected there, because you go, why would you take on seemingly impossible unless you hidden gifts? They're kind of in the same direction. They're not the same, but you'd have the same kind of life perspective to have those two both present in your life. You wouldn't say everything sucks and I believe in seemingly impossible. You go, the two don't make good partners. So I could have been a victim my whole life and said, this is so unfair, and why me? And it takes a little perspective when you get a little older, but I never regretted it as a kid. There were times when I didn't like it, but we weren't allowed to complain about it, because if I did have to fight my way out, even if I, like hurt my fist by hitting a kid or whatnot, I couldn't tell my mom, because that meant I was fighting. So you just dealt with it on your own anyhow. I didn't realize all the life lessons I was learning by having to do all that stuff. It's a tough way to learn some of those, but pretty darn graphic. The more graphic, the more you learn the lesson. So nothing theoretical about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate having you on. I wonder, before you leave, I was hoping I could ask just one more question and see if you
can ask as many as you want, John. I'm going to charge you I'm charging you 3 times. What's the fee I'm getting for this? Is this another comp one? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So I'm on double time now.
You're on double time. Yeah. So I just want to see if you can give some advice to new leaders out there that may have fallen into this motivation trap and motivating their team, and how do they get out of it? And what is just one piece of advice that you have for a new leader that's something they're not going to learn in school, they're not going to learn, through traditional means that you would have for them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know a lot of young leaders especially struggle with it. If you look at the New York Times best-selling list, there's got to be a dozen on there that they're about leadership. The 5 steps to being an authentic leader, the 3-step bulletproof leadership program, and they're all different. All of them are helpful. But again, there are recipes written by, let's say you and I get together and write a leadership book. It's the John and John leadership book. And if we're speaking to a new leader who doesn't fit that style, it doesn't help them to be inauthentically following someone else's program, even if there's parts of it that are helpful for them. So we actually work with a lot of young leaders to develop who they be, if you will, as a leader. Because let's say you're introverted, which is stereotypically not the leader. You're a quiet, introverted person. And let's say you're very high in empathy or caring, a soft skill. That doesn't sound like our model for a CEO. But why couldn't you be an incredibly good leader by being empathetic and introverted? There's nothing wrong with it. And you can develop your path to doing that. You're going to be a much more authentic and more effective leader by going with who you be, if you will. Especially as a leader, if you're empathetic, it's a tremendous quality for a leader, and we don't talk about it. We more talk about the extrovert kind of stuff. Oh, charismatic, great speaker, inspirational, rah motivation. That's kind of it's kind of a military view. Like, he's the rah Marine kind of guy. Well, if you're not built that way, why go that direction? So to most people generally have a sense of who they be, like their strong values or qualities. Design your leadership skills, practices, abilities, and style, if you will, around who you are authentically being, because then you never have to worry about saying, oh my God, I've got to give a rah-rah speech because I'm the leader and I hate rah-rah speeches. No, you could be super empathetic and get the same results from your team. You're going to get better results being who you are rather than following someone else's script for doing that.
That's really good advice. Well, I really appreciate having you on, and I'm going to link up to your evokinggenius.com. I'll put a link to your book and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Is there any other way you want people to contact you if they have any questions or want to find out more about Evoking Genius?
You know what? It's same advice. Yeah. You know the last name, just Google me. It's easy.
Just Google it.
I'm easy to find, and I handle most of my own correspondence. I have an assistant that looks at it, but I like to connect with people. Eventually that will be impractical, but I like connecting with people. And so, love to hear from people.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with John Hittler. If you could, head over to iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Radio or iHeartRadio or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this show, and follow, subscribe, leave me a rating and review, click the little heart button, and share this with your friends. Thank you so much.